You a friend?
Hi there. Welcome back. My name is Sheldon McLeod. This is Thinking Out Loud. This is my podcast, videocast, presented to you exclusively by SaltWire. And I wanted to talk a little bit about lessons learned. And I want to talk a little bit about something that happened that doesn't happen very often here in Nova Scotia, or anywhere for that matter. That a government comes out with what it says is a strong policy for whatever. And then just a few weeks or even a few months later, they say, well, okay, we did what we didn't intend to do, or the policy did what it wasn't expected to do. Let's talk a little bit about the wine industry here in Nova Scotia. And I'll invite you to check out, there's a great commentary about this from my colleague, Mark DeWolf. He took this on just in the last week or so. But the headline itself is what I wanted to talk to you about, at least to start. This is our jumping off point. The province backs down on controversial pricing policy, and Nova Scotia farm wineries are pleased. Bill Spur is the reporter who did this, published it at the Chronicle Herald and at saltwire.com. And as you may have already read or heard, the Nova Scotia Government announced a contentious policy on support for part of the wine industry has been paused. Now, why should this be important? Well, there was pushback almost immediately to this policy. In fact, there was a story from Bill Spur just on the 4th of March in which one of the folks who owns, Domaine de Grand Pré, had said, a farm winery, that this was a shock, came out of nowhere, that they were not expecting this. And this being the farm wineries across Nova Scotia. They had, as was reported, and as Bernice Stutz of Grand Pré Wines had said, they had a phone call or some letter or notion that they were called to a meeting in Halifax, and that was on the 4th of January. The meeting was to be on the 5th of January, and it was to explain that there would be, following on the Monday, a change in policy, the markup policy that determines the price of wines, and that it was going to change. Now, this is layered. There's a lot to this, but Nova Scotia Liquor Corporation is the agency, obviously, that is responsible for setting alcohol prices in this province. And for a multitude of reasons that I'm not going to go into, some of the rules, some of the laws are quite old, and more than a few folks have asked for them to be reviewed. But that's not why we're talking about this. There was actually a World Trade Organization dispute that said, launched by Australia, that said Nova Scotia was unfairly disadvantaging other wine producers through something that was called an emerging wine preference. That's not the technical name, but it gave preferential pricing to wines that were produced here in Nova Scotia. Well, what the government had said to the wine farmers, or the folks who had spent all their money and effort growing grapes to turn into wine, is that they were moving to a system that would help to support bottling that wine. Now, what that meant was that some of the bigger companies that are, bottling wine in Nova Scotia could see quite a lucrative change in the revenue stream. And it would then perhaps muddy the waters. I don't know, pour a little water in the wine, if you will. That was confusing this matter, so that the people who were bottling potentially juice from other parts of the world were going to get a preferential treatment and get government dollars that would not then be directly going to the folks who were growing grapes and trying to grow an industry that they've been building for the past 20, 30 years. And why that was important is that some folks thought it wasn't fair. That this is a picture from New Year's Eve that was posted on social media that has the Premier of Nova Scotia there, Tim Houston, the Mayor of Halifax, that's, of course, Mike Savage. There's Jordy Morgan, who's a consultant who works with, I believe, Restaurants Canada now. And there's another gentleman in that image. And the person who is on the right of the Premier, or to the left in that photo, is a man whose name is, let me just see here, Carl Sparks. Carl Sparks, the owner of commercial winery Devonian Coast. And this was on New Year's Eve. 4 days later, farm wineries are told, come to the city, we're changing policy. And didn't sit well, obviously, with a lot of folks. In fact, just after that change happened and the Nova Scotia spring sitting of the legislature began, in which the budget was introduced and some of the details of that plan came forward, there was something called a media scrum. This was on the day this basically became public, or at least there was a way to publicly ask the Premier about it. And this is from the Legislative Scrum. And Michael Gorman with CBC, a former Herald reporter, brought this issue to the Premier, and this is what the Premier had to say.
Roger, we got limited time with you.
Sure.
What's not clear to me, though, is this subsidy that's now being extended to 2 commercial bottlers about responding to it.
I'm going to stop you. If I can stop you, if you want to ask it, let's stick to the facts.
Premier, I really resent every time you say that. I do my job.
You said it's limited to 2 people.
I do my job with integrity,
okay,
and I focus on facts, and I resent you suggesting otherwise.
But when you characterize it as it's only available to 2 people, I just want to be clear.
But no one else can do it at the scale of the 2 commercial bottlers.
Why not? Why not?
Because they don't have the scale.
Why can't they ramp up? Why can't they?
Premier, just to put a bow on whether or not you have a friendship with this gentleman, you don't consider him a friend?
Look, I love every single Nova Scotian. I won't
Right,
get
but
into
this
certain names. We'll be here for a long time. We don't want to waste time, so I'll be here a long time.
This particular gentleman, is he a friend?
I know him. I know. Are you a friend? I know
how about this,
tens of
Premier?
thousands of
Premier,
Nova
how about-
Scotians,
Premier, how
and I
about this?
consider them all.
That was from then. And we had obviously several weeks. In fact, there was March break. And the Premier was not expected to be back in the House of Assembly for this current week, but for some reason that changed and he was there. And that brings us to the developments from Tuesday, the 19th of March in the House of Assembly.
The time is now 2 o'clock, almost 2:01. We will begin questions by members put to ministers, and we will finish with a few minutes or a few seconds extra at the end.
Okay, so they ran a little bit late getting into it, and that's why the Speaker, Carla McFarland, said we can tack on that time to the end of the question period. So that's what happens between 2 and 3 o'clock in the Nova Scotia Legislature. And as per custom, the Leader of the Official Opposition gets to have the first question to ask a Minister of Government something specific. This, again, comes as the province had just announced that they were withdrawing or changing or in some ways going back on that initial plan to give a subsidy to the folks who were bottling wine here in Nova Scotia.
I recognize the Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Speaker, it took 3 weeks of sustained pressure inside this House and without for the Premier to actually finally meet with the grape growers and local wine producers in Nova Scotia. We know, however, that based on Freedom of Information requests, that the Premier had met with the 2 commercial bottlers many times since 2022. Madam Speaker, why did it take 3 weeks of public pressure and bad headlines for the Premier to do the right thing, meet with our local fine representatives, and agree to pause this dangerous plan that he had in place that could have jeopardized them all?
Okay, just for process sakes, for process sake, maybe you don't know, but what happens is all the questions are put through the Speaker. That's how it works. So when the Premier is answering a question, he's answering the question through the Speaker. That's part of our democracy. That is the Westminster system that we have. And you heard a very specific question, and now this is an opportunity for the Premier to respond.
I recognize the Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and we're big fans of the industry for sure, supporters of the industry over the years. Brings incredible potential to grow that industry. So I'm pleased that we had a productive meeting last night. I know leading up to that, the ministers had been meeting with the group. I was happy to be able to meet with them last night. But I think the reality is that there's so much potential for the province in that industry, but in so many other industries. We need to grow the economy of the province. That's all we're trying to do. And I hope the member doesn't take offense to trying to grow the economy of the province. That's what we're trying to do. We don't always get it right. When we don't, we try to fix it, and we'll do that here too as well.
All right, so that's a pretty big statement from the Premier of Nova Scotia, who says, well, we're just trying to grow the economy. Maybe a hint there that there were some unintended consequences or something that hadn't been considered, and that he's just trying to do the best, and he hopes that the opposition leader doesn't take offense to the province trying to grow the economy, which he isn't going to take offense to that, but that's part of the thrust and parry of what happens in question period.
I recognize the Leader of the Official Opposition.
Madam Speaker, it's very clear that you don't grow the economy by putting $250 million of our economy in farm wines in jeopardy. That's not how you grow the economy. That's how you kill our rural economy. And the fact is, the Premier met with commercial bottlers 2 years ago. It took sustained pressure from this chamber and from the industry representatives who didn't take this issue laying down, and I'm proud of them for not doing that, for him to actually meet with them and agree to pause with this. Why did it take so long for the Premier to realize how important this sector is and that his plans could have jeopardized the whole thing?
Very specific question. Why did it take so long? Let's talk a little bit more about that, and then the Premier's answer.
I recognize the Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I certainly don't want to give the member the impression that he had any impact on this decision. He certainly did not. We've been supporters of this industry for quite some time. I think that there's agreement that there are different sectors to the industry. They can coexist. We need to get that right. There's a desire from stakeholders across the spectrum to grow the industry. I share that desire. We'll get the right path forward. I'm confident in that. That's what we all want. We all want better things for Nova Scotia. We grow incredible grapes here. The potential for the industry is not just potential, it's being realized that we're seeing it in increasing sales. So we'll continue to look for ways to make sure that we do what's right by all Nova Scotians.
I recognize.
Okay, so you caught that. He said we do grow grapes, grape juice, grape wine, grape. Anywho. So the Premier is offering his side, which is, we do have a good product. We have faith in this. And yes, if we make a mistake, mind you, it was not because of the opposition that we changed our minds. We recognized and we will do better is essentially what he was saying. And then it's time once again for the Leader of the Opposition to say something to respond to that. 3 questions, right? 3 questions.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on his final supplementary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm certainly not taking credit for this. What happened is very obvious. The Premier got caught doing the wrong thing for the wrong reasons, and he didn't have a leg to stand on. First, this was a trade issue. Now it's an economic development issue. There's been no evidence produced that either of those things had anything to do with this change. Madam Speaker, the Premier says he's pausing the subsidy to commercial bottlers who are importing juice to compete with local wine growers. But we've heard from the Minister of Finance that the government has already dished out money to commercial wine bottlers already. Could the Premier please confirm if that's happened, if this program in fact hasn't been paused, and how much money has been provided to commercial bottlers in forms of subsidy?
So again, the Leader of the Opposition comes back with a very specific question asking how much money was already spent, how much was already given to these wineries that are bottling juice from other parts of the world. The Premier is then, not necessarily. There's a reason they don't call it answer period, is the common trope here.
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The program has been in place since January. There's multiple programs. They all initiate at the same time. So we're going to work to make sure we get it right. We've agreed to that. We'll work in that in good faith. We're sincere. We want to grow. We want to grow the sector, and the members should just be careful with his phrases. I mean, getting caught is something that happened with the member with the Auditor General's report on the theft of public money that the Auditor General was very clear the Liberal Party tried to conceal until after an election. We're not caught on anything. We're acknowledging that there's a way to maybe get this a little better. We're committed to doing that, and we will make sure that happens. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
So there you have the Premier saying, a little political thrust and parry. Caught? No, that's what happened with the Liberal leader. And what his reference is to the Auditor General's report from a few weeks ago that said that criminal charges, or at least the RCMP should have been notified about money that had been taken from the Nova Scotia Liberal Party Association. Someone did end up leaving that job because of it and, repaid the money. And the Premier is alluding to the fact that under former Premier, different government, that somehow Zach Churchill had something to do with it. I'm not privy to any of that, but a little chippy, a little bit of politics in the House of Commons, in the House of Assembly here in Nova Scotia. The Nova Scotia Legislature, that's where it happens. So just a quick note here, Mr. Premier, I think we're friends, aren't we? Can we talk here? Good on you for recognizing that what had been, essentially what you prescribed as a good news announcement for the industry turned out to have other impacts, and that you decided to revisit. And politically, that makes sense. But bad luck calling out reporters in that way. Bad luck making it an issue that wasn't one of your own doing. Clearly, the government made that decision, and the optics are terrible. Have New Year's Eve dinner or celebrations at a private club with one person who happens to have, the ear of the Premier, and then 4 days later, all the other wineries who don't have the same scale as that one told you that they thought it was a bad idea. So, good for you for at least owning part of that. I'd love to hear from you, what you think. You can always find me at sheldon.mcleod@saltwire.com, of course, on the socials. And if there's another story that you think we should wade into before I get to it, you can reach out to me to tell me. Don't forget to like and subscribe, follow along, join our YouTube family, and we'll be happy to talk to you next time about stories that matter here at Thinking Out Loud.